The phone rang at 6:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I had just poured my second cup of coffee and the kitchen clock was directly in my line of sight. The kind with Roman numerals my wife picked out at an antique fair in Lancaster County about 12 years ago. She was standing by the stove, her back to me, stirring oatmeal in the small saucepan she always used for 2 servings. Steel-cut oats. She insisted on steel-cut even though they took 40 minutes and I had told her 100 times that rolled oats tasted the same to me, but she liked the ritual of it. Or so she said. The caller ID showed my younger brother's name. Caleb. He's a long-haul trucker out of Scranton, runs a refrigerated rig up and down the East Coast, mostly produce and pharmaceuticals. We talk maybe twice a month, never at 6:47 in the morning. Caleb sleeps in his cab when he can, and when he can't, he sleeps in motels off the interstate, and he doesn't call anyone before 8 unless something's gone sideways. I picked up. I said, "You all right?" He didn't answer right away. I could hear the diesel hum of his truck idling, the static of the CB radio in the background, and then his voice came through low and careful, the way a man talks when he's standing too close to something he doesn't want to wake. "Is your wife home?" I looked at her. She was tapping the wooden spoon on the rim of the pot. 2 soft knocks, and she didn't turn around. The oatmeal smelled the way it always did. The morning light through the kitchen window hit the back of her gray cardigan, the same one she'd been wearing for the last 6 years. The one with the small mended hole near the left elbow from when she caught it on the garden gate. "She's right here," I said. "Making breakfast." "Why?" There was a long pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. I started to pull the phone away from my ear, and then I heard him exhale. "That's not possible," Caleb said. "I'm looking at her right now." She just walked into the diner at the Flying J off exit 41 in Carlisle. She's with a man. They're holding hands. I want to tell you that my heart stopped or my stomach dropped or any of those phrases people use when something impossible happens. But the truth is I felt nothing. Not at first. I felt like a man who has been told that water runs uphill and is waiting for the punchline. I looked at my wife again. She lifted the saucepan off the burner and poured the oatmeal into 2 bowls. The same 2 bowls. The blue one with the chip on the rim was mine. The cream-colored one with the painted rooster was hers. "Caleb," I said, slow, "I'm watching her pour oatmeal." "I'm watching her butter a piece of rye toast," he said. She just laughed. She put her hand on this guy's wrist. He's maybe 50, gray at the temples, brown leather jacket, khaki pants. He kissed her on the forehead about a minute ago. That's why I called. I almost dropped my coffee. My wife turned around then. She smiled at me and lifted both bowls and walked over to the table. She set mine down in front of the chair I was about to sit in. She kissed the top of my head, the way she had for 37 years, and went back to the counter for the spoons. "Caleb," I said, keeping my voice flat, "you're tired. You've been driving all night. Maybe it's someone who looks like her." "I've known her since 1988, he said. "I was at your wedding. I helped her pick out the dishwasher in your kitchen the year before her mother died. That's her. That's your wife. I'm telling you, that's your wife." I told him I had to go. I said it the way you say things when your hand is already pulling the phone away from your face. I hung up. I sat down at the table. I picked up the spoon. I ate the oatmeal. She sat across from me. She talked about the garden. She said the deer had been at the hostas again and we needed to put up the netting Garrett at the hardware store had recommended. She said her sister was coming by Thursday to drop off some recipe cards. She said the dryer was making that thumping sound again and could I take a look at it after breakfast. Everything she said was correct. Everything she said was the way she always said it. The slight pause before Thursday. The way she pronounced reshep with a little extra weight on the first syllable, like her mother used to. The little hum she made between sentences when she was thinking of what to say next. I watched her face. I watched her hands. She had a thin, pale scar on the back of her left hand from when she'd caught it on a nail in the basement door in 1996. I looked for it. It was there. Same place. Same shape. I said, How'd you sleep? Fine, she said. You were snoring again. I didn't snore. I never have. She used to tease me that I was the only man she'd ever met who slept like a stone. She'd said it for 37 years. The first time she ever said it was on our honeymoon in Asheville. She had just told me I was snoring again. I smiled. I took another bite of oatmeal. I said, "Sorry, honey." She smiled back. She went on talking about Thursday. I want to be clear about something. By the time I finished that bowl of oatmeal, I knew. I didn't know how, and I didn't know why, but I knew. There is a kind of knowing that doesn't come from your eyes or your ears. It comes from the part of you that has slept next to the same body for 37 years and can tell, in the dark, by the rhythm of her breathing, whether she had wine with dinner or not. That part of me was sitting very still and watching this woman across the table and saying, "This is not her," but the part of me that had eyes and ears was saying, "Of course it is. Look at her." I finished breakfast. I rinsed my bowl. I told her I was going down to the garage to look at the lawnmower because the pole cord had been sticking. She said okay. She kissed me on the cheek as I walked past. Her lips were the right temperature. Her perfume was right. Lavender and something else, the soap she always used. I walked out to the garage. I closed the side door behind me. I stood there in the dark for about a minute, breathing, smelling old motor oil and the cedar shavings from the hamster cage my grandson had left here last summer. Then I called Caleb back. He picked up on the first ring. "She's still here," he said. "They ordered more coffee. He's showing her something on his phone. Take a picture?" "I already did. I'll send it." It came through about 20 seconds later. I had to put on my reading glasses and tilt the phone toward the workbench light. The picture was taken from a booth across the diner, a little blurry, but clear enough. A woman in a navy blouse, her hair pulled back the way my wife wore it on days when she was going to be out for a long time, leaning toward a man with gray temples. Her face was turned 3/4 toward the camera. The light caught her cheekbone and the small mole just below her right ear. It was her, the same mole, the same cheekbone, the same way of leaning slightly forward when she was listening. Her head tilted just so. I'd watched her listen like that for almost 4 decades. It was her. And 5 minutes ago she had served me oatmeal in the kitchen. I sat down on the workbench stool. I put the phone face down on the bench, and I stared at the wall, at the pegboard where I keep the wrenches, at the calendar from the feed store that nobody ever bothers to flip the page on. The calendar still said September. We were in November. I am 63 years old. I retired from the regional bank 2 years ago after 41 years. I started as a teller in 1984, and I ended as a senior credit officer, which means that for most of my working life, my job was to look at numbers and at people and decide whether the two of them added up. You learn things doing that work. You learn that almost everybody lies a little. You learn that the lie is usually in the small numbers, not the big ones. Because people overcorrect on the things they're afraid you'll check. You learn that the truth is almost always in what someone doesn't say, or in what they say too quickly, or in the way their eyes move when you ask about something that seems minor. I am telling you this because what I want you to understand is that I did not panic. I did not confront her. I did not cry or shake or call the police. I went back inside. I told her the lawnmower was going to need a new pull cord, but I could pick one up tomorrow. She said okay. She was loading the dishwasher. I told her I was going to drive into town to get the mail and pick up a few things at the hardware store. She said, "Take your jacket, it's cold." I took my jacket. I got in the truck. I drove past the post office and kept going. I drove to a strip mall about 22 miles east of our house, in the town we never go to, and I went into a Best Buy and I bought 4 small wireless cameras, the kind that fit in the smoke detector or a houseplant. I paid cash. I drove home a different way. When I got back, she was at her sewing table in the den. She looked up. She said, "Did you forget the mail?" I had. I said, "Yeah. Brain like a sieve. I'll grab it tomorrow." She laughed. The laugh was right. The laugh was exactly right. I went upstairs to my office and I sat at my desk and I started thinking like a credit officer. I thought, if someone wanted to switch out a man's wife, why would they do it? Money. It's always money. People kill each other over a lot of things, but they switch each other out for money. There isn't a second reason. I logged into our joint checking. Everything looked normal. Mortgage payment, utilities, the standing transfer to the savings account, the small monthly to our grandson's college fund. I scrolled back. October. September. August. September. August. Everything in order. Then I checked the savings account. 6 weeks ago, there had been a withdrawal of $9,400. 3 weeks ago, another, $8,850. A week ago, $9,100. 3 withdrawals, all under $10,100. 3 withdrawals, all under $10,000, the exact amount that doesn't trigger a federal reporting requirement. I had spent 41 years in banking. I knew what I was looking at. Someone was structuring withdrawals to stay below the reporting threshold. Someone who knew enough to do that, but not enough to do it from different accounts on different days. My wife had never made a financial decision in her life that I wasn't part of. We did the bills together every Sunday afternoon. We talked about every purchase over $500. She had once called me from a furniture store because she wasn't sure if she should buy a side table that cost $89. I closed the laptop. I sat there for a long time. Then I went downstairs. She was still at the sewing machine. I stood in the doorway and I watched her work for a minute. She was mending a button onto one of my old flannel shirts. Her hands moved the way her hands always moved. A little tilt of her head. The way she bit her bottom lip when she was concentrating. I said, "Honey, you remember the name of that B&B we stayed at on our anniversary in 2009? She looked up. She thought for a second. She said, "Oh gosh, the one in Vermont? Sweetwater something? We had never gone to Vermont for our anniversary. In 2009, we went to a B&B in Galena, Illinois. It was called the Wisteria House. We stayed 3 nights. There was a cat named Mr. Beans that slept on our luggage. She had laughed about Mr. Beans for years." I smiled. I said, "That's right, Sweetwater." She smiled back and went on sewing. I walked into the kitchen. I leaned against the counter. I closed my eyes for about 30 seconds. Then I opened them and I made myself a sandwich. That night, I installed the cameras. One in the smoke detector in the den, one in the smoke detector in the living room, one in the spare bedroom we used as an office, one in the basement near the workbench, where I'd seen her go down twice that day with her phone. I slept next to her that night. She put her arm across my chest the way she always did. She breathed against my neck the way she always did. She breathed against my neck the way she always did. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I thought about the woman in the diner photograph. I thought about how my brother had said she put her hand on the man's wrist. I tried to remember the last time my wife had put her hand on my wrist. 2 days ago, at dinner, I tried to remember whether it had felt the way it always did. I couldn't remember. And the morning I made coffee, she came downstairs in her robe. She said good morning the way she always did. She poured her own cup. She didn't kiss my forehead the way she always did. She poured her own cup. She didn't kiss my forehead the way she always did. I waited to see if she would, and she didn't. It was a small thing. The kind of thing nobody else would notice. The kind of thing I noticed. At 11 that morning, I drove to the bank. Not our bank where everybody knows me. The next town over, I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and then I called an old friend of mine, a man I had worked with for 22 years before he moved over to fraud investigations at a different institution. His name doesn't matter for this. I told him what I had. I told him about the structured withdrawals. I told him about my brother and the diner. I didn't tell him about the oatmeal. I couldn't yet. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I was done, he said, "Listen to me carefully. Don't say anything to her. Don't accuse anyone of anything. Don't change your behavior. We need to figure out who else has access to the account, and we need to figure out where the cash went. Can you sit on this for a week?" I said I could. He said I could. He said, "Are you safe?" I had not thought about that. I sat in the parking lot for a moment. And then I said, "I don't know." "Sit on it," he said. "Watch. Don't drink anything you didn't pour yourself." That was the line that finally made my hands shake. I sat there for another 20 minutes before I could drive home. Over the next 4 days, I watched her, and I watched the cameras at night when she thought I was asleep. The first night, she did nothing unusual. She went to bed when I did. The second night, I waited until I heard her breathing change, and then I went down to my office and pulled up the camera in the basement. She was down there 1 in the morning. She had a phone I had never seen before. A small flip phone. She was sitting on the steps, and she was talking to someone in a low voice. The audio on the camera wasn't good, but I could make out her tone. She was annoyed. She was reporting in. She kept saying soon, and I told you. At one point she said, "He hasn't asked a thing. He's a stone." I sat in my office with my hands flat on the desk, and I watched my wife of 37 years on a screen betray me in a basement. That word she used? Stone. That was what she used to say about how I slept. Not what this woman would know. She had been told it. She had been told a lot of things. The third night, the same. Different time. 2:15. Different voice on the other end, I thought. A man. The fourth day I went into town and I sat in a coffee shop with a friend I had called. He brought a folder. Inside was a printout he had asked one of his analysts to put together for him as a favor. 3 accounts had been opened in my wife's name over the last 8 months, at 3 different institutions, none of them the one we banked at. The cash withdrawals from our savings had been deposited into one of those accounts within 24 hours each time. From there, the money had been wired to a 4th account, an LLC registered in Delaware. The LLC had one listed member. A man with gray temples. A man who lived in a town 20 miles south of us. A man who had been married to my wife's older sister for 11 years until they divorced in 2003. I knew him. I had eaten Thanksgiving dinner with him in 1997. I had loaned him my pickup truck the summer my sister-in-law was sick. I had stood next to him at her funeral in 2014. My friend across the table watched me read all this. He didn't say anything. He let me sit with it. Finally, I said, "How long?" He shook his head. "The accounts are recent. But these things don't start with the money. The money is the last part. They had to have been talking for a while before anyone moves cash." I drove home. I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes. Then I went inside. She was making chicken. The kitchen smelled like rosemary. She turned around and smiled and asked how my day was. I said it was fine. I asked how hers was. She said it was fine. She said the dryer was working again. She had unclogged the lint trap herself. Look at me being handy. I sat down at the kitchen table. I watched her move around the kitchen. I thought about the woman in the diner photograph. I thought about the way my wife of 37 years had stood by while another woman wore her face. I thought about the man with gray temples and the 11 years he had spent calling me brother. I said, "Honey, can I ask you something?" She turned. "Of course." "What was the name of the cat at the B&B in Galena?" She tilted her head. She thought for a second. She said, "Galena? Oh, sweetheart, that was such a long time ago. I don't think I remember." She had told me the story of Mr. Beans, that cat, at least twice a year for 16 years. She had told it to our grandson the previous Christmas. She had laughed until she cried when she got to the part about him hiding her shoe. "That's okay," I said. "It was a long time ago." She smiled. She went back to the chicken. I went upstairs, and I called my friend, and I told him I was ready. He told me what to do. He told me to come into his office Monday morning. He told me to bring everything. He said the bank would handle the structuring case, and from there it would unfold the way it unfolded. He told me to stay quiet through the weekend. I made it through the weekend. Saturday, I mowed the lawn. Sunday, we went to her sister's for dinner. Her real sister, the one who had been married to the man with gray temples and who, as far as I could tell, knew nothing. I watched her sister hug her at the door. I watched the two of them in the kitchen. I watched for any sign at all. I didn't see one. On the drive home, I asked her, casually, what she thought of her sister these days. She said, "She's doing okay. I worry about her. She's been alone for so long." She said it with such tenderness. I had to look out the window. Monday, I went to the bank. I sat in my friend's office for 3 hours. I signed papers. I gave statements. I handed over the camera footage, the screenshots from our accounts, the photograph from my brother. The investigation took 11 weeks. They were not weeks I would wish on anyone. I slept in our bed every night. I ate breakfast across from her every morning. I kissed her cheek when I left the house, and I kissed her cheek when I came home. Twice during those weeks she put her hand on my wrist at dinner, and I let her, and I noted, without anger, that it did not feel the way it used to. It had not felt that way in months, and I had told myself all those months that I was just an old man getting tired. I had not been getting tired. I had been watching the temperature of my own life drop a degree at a time and pretending I didn't feel the cold. The other woman, the one in the diner, was not a twin. I want to be clear about that because I know it would make the story easier if she were. She was not. The woman in the diner was my wife. The woman in my kitchen was the actress, a professional, 41 years old, from Cleveland, with 7 years of regional theater behind her and a manager who specialized in placing her in look-alike jobs, which I came to learn is a real industry, mostly used for stand-in work on film sets. She had done 6 months of preparation. She had been given my wife's mannerisms, her recipes, her stories, her gestures. She'd been given a year of journal entries my wife had kept. She'd had 3 sessions with a plastic surgeon who had made small adjustments to her jaw and her chin. She had been paid $84,000 for the work, and she had been promised another $60,000 when the job was done, which I came to learn was supposed to be done in approximately 3 more weeks, when I would have signed over a refinanced second mortgage to a contractor who did not exist, controlled by the LLC in Delaware, controlled by the man with gray temples, controlled, ultimately, by my wife. The plan was for me to be financially ruined and emotionally untouched. She wasn't going to leave me. She was going to come back to me after a long trip to visit her cousin, and I was going to be poor and confused and grateful she had come home. She and the man with the gray temples were going to live, very quietly, on the money, in a part of Florida where no one would think to look for them. They were going to take their time. The actress did not know all of this. She had been told only that she was helping a woman get clean of an abusive husband. She had been told I was dangerous. She had been told to keep me calm. When the police came to my front door and arrested her, she wept, and she gave a full statement within 90 minutes. I do not feel anger toward her. I feel something closer to pity. She was a woman who had been desperate enough to take a job that should have told her, in its very first hour, that something was deeply wrong. My wife was arrested at a diner outside Carlisle, Pennsylvania, the same diner where my brother had seen her the first time. She had grown comfortable. She had stopped varying her pattern. The man with the gray temples was arrested 40 minutes later at a strip mall 4 miles away, sitting in his car, eating a sandwich. I did not go to the arrest. I did not want to see her. I have seen her once since, across a courtroom 8 months later. She looked at me. I looked at her. I did not feel rage. I did not feel love. I felt the way a man feels when he looks at a house he used to live in and sees that someone has painted it a color he would never have chosen. People ask me sometimes, what tipped me off? They expect me to say it was the photograph from my brother, the structured withdrawals, the flip phone in the basement. Those were the proof. They were not the tip. The tip was the snoring. She told me I was snoring, and I had never snored a day in my life. The actress had been told in her preparation that I snored. Someone had written it down, somewhere, a long time ago. Perhaps in a moment of affection my wife had since forgotten, and an actress had memorized it. And on her first morning in my kitchen she had handed me back a small lie that had nothing to do with money, or sex, or betrayal, and everything to do with the fact that whoever had assembled her did not know me as well as they thought they did. A man who has been loved for 37 years knows what it sounds like when his wife teases him. He knows it the way he knows his own breath. He does not always notice when it stops, but he notices very clearly when a stranger tries to do it. I live alone now. I sold the house. I moved to a smaller place about 15 miles from where my son lives, and I see my grandson on Sundays. And I have a dog now, a beagle named after my father, and I take him for 2 long walks a day. I cook for myself. I sleep well. I do not dream about her. I dream sometimes about the kitchen, and the morning light on the back of a gray cardigan, and the smell of steel-cut oats. People want me to be bitter. I am not. I am 63 years old, and I have learned, finally, what my 41 years in banking should have taught me already. The numbers tell you the truth, but the small things tell you the truth first. The pause before a name. A laugh in the wrong key. The way someone you have loved for half your life forgets the name of a cat. You don't have to shout. You don't have to break dishes. You don't have to demand answers from people who have already chosen their answers without you. You just have to sit very still. You have to eat your oatmeal. You have to drive into town and buy 4 small cameras with cash. You have to call an old friend, and you have to be willing after all those years to believe what you already know. I think about that morning more than I think about any other morning of my life. Not because it was the worst, but because it was the morning I finally listened to a voice I had been ignoring for almost 2 years. The signs had been there. The Sunday phone calls that had grown a little shorter. The dinners where she looked at her plate more than she looked at me. The afternoon a year ago when I came home early and she startled, just for a second before her face folded back into the one I knew. I had filed all of those small things away in a drawer in my mind labeled old age or moods or nothing. That drawer, it turned out, was where the truth had been living the whole time. I have come to believe that betrayal almost never arrives as a thunderclap. It arrives as a series of quiet decisions that other people make about your life while you are busy trusting them. Lorraine did not become a stranger in one night. She became one over months, perhaps years, in conversations I was not part of. In a basement I had stopped going down to. In a flip phone I never thought to look for. And the man with the gray temples did not betray me at her funeral, or at our Thanksgiving table, or the day I loaned him my pickup. He betrayed me later, in small steps, the way most men become traitors. One bad choice at a time, none of them feeling, in the moment, like the one that mattered. What saved me was not anger. Anger would have made me shout in my own kitchen and lose every advantage I had. What saved me was the habit of 41 years of looking at numbers and asking, does this add up? That was the discipline. That was the trained mind doing what a trained mind does. I tell my grandson now, when he asks me about it, that intelligence is not about being clever. It is about being willing to sit very still with a question you do not want the answer to, and to wait, and to look, until the answer comes. The other thing I would tell him, if he were old enough to understand it, is that nerve is not the absence of fear. I was afraid every minute of those 11 weeks. I was afraid at breakfast. I was afraid when she put her arm across my chest at night. The nerve was in eating the oatmeal anyway. The nerve was in driving home a different way after I bought the cameras. The nerve was in answering Caleb's call, instead of pretending I had not heard the phone. And the last thing, the thing I hope outlives me, is that decency does not require revenge. I did not need to break her. The law would do what the law does. What I needed was to walk out of my own house with my dignity intact and my conscience clean, and I did. I sleep well now. The dog beside the bed. The light through the window. The quiet, finally, of a man who told himself the truth.